yourself a book. When you get there, you find the book you need, but you find a whole lot more. You find all the services that the library has in store. There are stories for the kids, and films and videos for you. Periodicals and reference to help you do the things that you want to do. There's music and there's art and there's literature for free. And best of all, smiling, friendly faces that you see. It's a people place, the library. Check it out at the library.
The experience that started me writing was frustration with everything in general. I just knew that there was no other way. After talking to a lot of friends who were doing English classes, I knew that that was the best way I could think of to start getting things on paper that should be written down, things that were troubling me and things I wanted to tell about, and mostly stories to tell. That's what started me. What it does for me is eventually it calms me down, because I felt, as I said, there was too much unsaid as far as myself was concerned. The topics just evolve. There's never any, they're never planned. You'll see that when you hear me read. They just happen. Something I do, someplace I go, and that's it. Come home, and that's it. It's on paper. And that's been a very interesting thing to have happen to me, because I was pretty much a lost person for 50 years. I was really floundering around. I'm not kidding. That I feel like that's the only way a person can really deal with some things that are going on in our society today, is to put them down, think about them, and let other people read them some other time maybe, but at least put them down. I have to tell you that when I first looked at Herb Hyde's column on the 15th of September and saw this Lincoln poet, Helen Crosswait, I really was quite stunned. I don't know why. Just looking at that, it really made my eyes go really open, because I've visualized myself as doing some writing here and there, but Lincoln poet, and so that was very flattering. So I will try and get some of that across tonight when I do my reading. Although I do, as Vicki said when she introduced me, I do classify myself more as a writer of prose, short story, anecdote, etc. I was born on the Rosebud Indian Reservation in 1930. Fortunate to have good parents who had my best interests at heart, regardless of what happened to me. And my dad was a Britisher from Liverpool, England. He was an aristocrat. My grandfather was manager of the Cunard Ship Line, and he spoke 17 languages, and I didn't know that for years and years. And so I still keep touch with my relatives in Great Britain, and my cousin Peter is he's the chairman of the board of Lloyd's of London. So you folks are looking at somebody who knows somebody. Anyway, my mother was from Reynoldsville, Pennsylvania, and she was of Pennsylvania Dutch descent. And she came to South Dakota when she was 3 years old as a homesteader. I do need to do some of this background because I think it'll help when I do my reading. My parents raised me to be a good girl, and I heard that really a lot. And I just never figured out for years and years and years that they hadn't told me what a good girl was. So one day when I was in Omaha and I found this, I finally figured some things out. Can you all see this? And I really did. I had a quite a rough time trying to be a good girl. And I don't know if I was precocious or not. Beverly could probably tell you. She's been around ever since I was 12 years old, in and out of my life. But I certainly did have some problems with this philosophy. Good girls go to heaven, she said. But she didn't tell me that bad girls get to go everywhere. And so I kind of got sidetracked there for a while, and here's where I ended up. If all else fails, lower your standards. It was rough, I'm not kidding. So when I was married for 30 years, and I raised 2 children in South Dakota. I was married to a PhD who was in education, and I tried to be a good girl, and I just wasn't working. I wasn't happy. There was just something missing. And in 1982, I came to Lincoln and enrolled in the University of Nebraska. Lived with my daughter for a short time, and we were roommates. She was working on a master's degree, and I eventually finished in the area of university studies, spending most of my time in the hours, in hours getting psychology courses, sociology, history, women's studies, literature, and political science courses. It was wonderful being in university studies because I had my choice. I could do anything I wanted. I love that. If they hadn't been here, I don't know if anybody's ever heard the words Math 90C. It terrorizes the whole non-traditional student section when they say Math 90C up there. And I got in that class, and I lasted about 45 minutes in that one. And then I went into a foreign language class that made my hair just start sticking straight up in the air. And so I was really grateful when university studies came along. Anyway, women's studies was wonderful. I can't even describe the gloriousness of knowing the things that I found out and I learned, and the women that I read about, the lives that I was able to identify with and figure myself out for a change, and find out it wasn't all my fault. Everything wasn't working. It just was a great, great feeling. And even though having taken women's studies brought much, much sadness into my life, because and I'll never be the same after finding out what I found out, it created a calmness. It created a sense of who I am. And I'll always be grateful for this particular area of study. I feel really blessed to have had a second chance to kind of try things over again. And as Vicki said, here's my book. It's called Riot in a Parrot Shop and Other Eruptions. And I'm going to read some out of here, but I'm also going to read some of my unpublished stuff, too, in the time that I have left. Get rid of some of this stuff. I think I'll just start with the middle of the book here. This one, I write a lot after I ride in my car. I do an awful lot of writing after I've been in my car. And I think the first 2 I read, I'll probably do that. And I spent a lot of time on the road trying to keep in touch with my family, which I left behind. I have a son, Mark, who lives in Sheridan, Wyoming. My daughter, Connie, lives in Sundance, Wyoming. They both ended up in Wyoming because it appeared there was more money in Wyoming than in South Dakota. But now, I don't know, everybody's having trouble these days, so I don't think there is money anywhere, frankly. But anyway, my mom lives in Martin, and she's still on the Pine Ridge Reservation. And I think a lot of that will come out. That's one reason I kind of wanted to share this with you, because I think it will make it much easier for you to digest what I'm about. This one's called On the Way to Martin, South Dakota, Thanksgiving 1990. I dedicated this one to Bill Clefcorn. I happened to be in his class last spring, and I gave him a choice of poems, and so here it is. He picked this one. Ruby and I skim along Highway 20 on the eve before the day we give thanks. We are heading toward the land of Spotted Tail, which holds my roots. I am weary of the long drive. We have been on the road since morning. First across Nebraska on 80, then up 281 into O'Neill, where pickups, trucks, and cars pack Main Street with Thanksgiving shoppers. I fill Ruby up with unleaded as the wind whips the Christmas decorations vigorously back and forth and loudspeakers blast Christmas carols into the crisp air. In Amesworth, the blonde tinseled angels make their annual appearance on Main Street, their long stretched bugles to their lips. I buy a cream soda in the IGA in Valentine, and the winter evening descends upon the parking lot where big brown paper sacks march in pairs out of doors supported by the arms of humans. I see a lighted tree in a window and wonder if I will be greeted again this year by the giant spruce in the middle of Martin's main intersection. Near Crookston, the black hills of the horizon seem to heave against the dying sunset, and I barely miss a stunned white-tailed deer as I come over a hill. The crescent moon hangs over Cody as burly clouds roll overhead and fresh-cut diamonds begin to flicker on and off. I have lost contact with Cedar Rapids, so I hit the radio button to hear the familiar rhythm of the tom-toms of KINI at Rosebud, and the wonderful sacred wailing of the singers comes at me with wild, invigorating shrieks and soothing, pounding vowel sounds, flooding me with reminders of the utmost in elegance and wonder. The drums set my fingers tapping on the wheel, and once again I am back among the Pilgrims and the Indians for Thanksgiving. I'll read another one kind of similar to that one. I've got to put my glasses on too. Everything's going to pieces, folks. This is called Taking Mom to White River, South Dakota on Memorial Day, 1991. My mother and I have a good relationship, but we have always been just a wee bit different. Or maybe we're just so much alike that I can't figure it out. But this is typical of my mother and me together, and of a Memorial Day service we went to. She panics when I decide to fiddle with my earrings, afraid she will be late, miss something of this special day, and she resents not being able to drive herself the 80 miles to her town. My creeping Jenny emotions attempt to take over as we drive into the Prairie Land graveyard, which holds my roots, and we place egg carton crosses on the graves of 8 people who died young, all members of her family. The American Legion has been here with flags and a red poppy bouquet on fathers' and grandfathers' graves, which floods me with the Memorial Day memories of someone reciting in Flanders Field at a program at 10 a.m. in the school gym. Hurry, she prods, and we rush to the old schoolhouse where classes have been let out and children ushered in for the services, where the color guard in carefully preserved uniforms click off their steps to the front and retire. Families who have warmed these bleachers for decades reflect on the meaning and attainment of peace as the commander renders his message and honors a feeble World War I veteran, the only one left in Millette County. The young citizens' awards are touching and remind me of being a Pask when I was 8 or 9 and representing the state of South Dakota as a little patriot in purple. The youthful winner with his short-cropped hair and big glasses gives us a lump in our throat at his rendition. I recall Badger Clark, state poet, reciting in the gym and paper poppies running red as blood when it rained, and reverie captures me for a moment away from the Our Town version of I Have a Dream by the county chorus and the applause which comes in loving deluge. They retire the colors and she gives a heroic leap, grasping her walker so she can hurry back to the cemetery for taps and a tribute to those buried under the wonderful wild prairie, and suddenly we are among the markers again, in time for the deafening load, aim, fire of the rifles. And we look into smoky blueness as our ears ring freedom and war, freedom and war, freedom and war, and we think our isolated, separate thoughts on this, another Memorial Day. The book is called Riot in a Parrot Shop, which is named after a poem called Riot in a Parrot Shop, which I finally decided I knew I had, the first time I ever went to the Playmore Ballroom, I knew I had to write something. I mean, who has never been there? Raise your hand. Don't raise your hand. Okay. Anyway, I had been born on this reservation. At 23 years old, I married someone who was also a South Dakota resident, and I did get off the reservation, but I had never been exposed to anything like the Playmore Ballroom in Lincoln, Nebraska. I will never forget that as long as I live. My eyes must have just completely gone out of my head. And of course, I was either freshly divorced or very close to being divorced. So I was having emotions you wouldn't believe. I hadn't been on a dance floor for 30 years to speak of. And I looked in that room, and I went with these two friends, and I looked around and saw all these people having the most marvelous time that I've ever, glasses clinking and band playing. I've never seen anything like it. And you have to go there to understand that, and I think most of you have. But anyway, it worked out for me because in March of this year I was in a clefcorn class. I knew this poem had to be written, Riot in a Parrot Shop. And one day I was over at the park. It was about the 15th or to the 18th of March, and it was a really sunny day, and there was a parrot in a tree. And somebody had taken their parrot out of its cage to get some sun. So I went and took this picture, and all of a sudden when I got home, I got to thinking, if that picture turns out, I'm going to put it on my book. And that's what happened. Anyway, here's the poem. It's called Singles Night at the Playmore Ballroom, or Riot in a Parrot Shop. Out of humdrum cages they fly the coop every Wednesday. From the cities they come, and the counties and several states they converge on West O Street. Baggy pants, swirly-skirted, cupid-lipped, with lanolin and brute and plenty of charm to spare. Some straight, some curlied, some shy as rain in Dakota, some brazen as flies, some green as beer on St. Pat's Day, but as perfect as they can possibly be at this stage in the scheme of things. The trombone emits a gigantic whine, and the tuxedoed leader waves his scepter, and a magic spell permeates as the nostalgic patrons succumb to the big band sound on Singles Night at the Playmore Ballroom. They gyrate and twirl and spin and pirouette to the sound of their yesterdays. The out-of-town gentleman at our table is not impressed with a short, handsome man who opens his shirt and deodorizes himself after each set. What in hell does that crazy bastard think he's doing, is the way he puts it, as the petite vocalist in blue croons. You're nobody till somebody loves you. You're nobody till somebody cares. They sweat, they bounce, they cavort as the silvery ball spins round and round on the ceiling until they are captured by the hands of the old clock on the wall, and suddenly it's the witching hour for Cinderella and her prince. Fairy tale time is suspended, kaput, and the tired skeletons of an era almost past head their weary bones toward the parking lot where carriages await to bear them back to their cages in the humdrum, real world. I think I'll read a little more serious one now, and then I'll kind of go back and forth. This one is called The Barbies. This one was an assignment in class. They said, take the first line of a poem and write a poem to match the first lines of someone's poem. Mark Strand wrote a poem called The Babies, and the first line of the poem was, let us save the babies. And as a women's studies major, I've always had this interesting development about where you go from being a baby. How do you get to be a Barbie? And this is my kind of assessment of the whole business. Let us save the Barbies. Let us buy them more lipsticks. Their eyes are cadmium blue and their lips are ruby red. They shall wear Revlon, and the hair on their heads shall be kinked, but the hair on their legs is obscene. Let us not wait for tomorrow. Even if we are anorexic, we must be desired, lusted after. Let us hurry. They want us to paste on our nails with glue and our eyelashes with mucilage. Our sun-scorched skin is beginning to carcinogize. Our teeth and gums ache with wires and bands. Let us hurry before our Colgate smile turns to dust. Heroines of days of our lives toddle toward the Sealy Posturepedics on pencil-thin heels. We must move faster. The Kens are Dons, and they are making us an offer we cannot refuse. We are still running. More Barbies are locked in the warehouse. Their screams are like sirens. We are still running to the centers. Our clothes are getting ragged. We must not wait for tomorrow. Let us hurry. We must save the Barbies. Let us try to save the Barbies. I'll always be so grateful for the women's studies and what they did. The fact that they made me realize that it wasn't me that was wrong with the world. It was the world that was wrong with me. I was trying to play the role of the good girl, and I don't imagine there's a woman my age that hasn't tried to play that role or been forced to play it. And I didn't even know what a good girl was. And this business of don't be curious, that's one thing my mother, I do not know, you know, I think she was afraid. Her fears from the life that she had had on the homestead led her to tell me not to ask questions. And I didn't. But it was simply because of the implication that she gave me that to ask questions was a problem for a woman. And I don't believe, I can't remember, but I don't believe she told that, I don't believe that she said that to my brother. I can't remember her doing that because I was older. It seemed like I would remember. But there was a lot of restrictions on the way I should act, like, you know, the old thing about keep your knees together and don't laugh too much. I just knew that there was something that needed to be done, and there was only one person that's going to do it, and it had to be me. So I left my roots in South Dakota, where I had been born, lived for 50 years, and came here, and I was still married when I got here. I don't know what I'm going to do with this one, but this was a tough one to write. It was written about the day that I moved out of my house in Rapid City. I had a nice big house on a hill, and you should see what I live in now. No, you shouldn't. But anyway, I had a nice place, and it was looking at the backside of Mount Rushmore and 1,000,001 trees. But this day I had to get my things out of the house on a hill, and it was supposed to have been arranged for me to just drive up with a truck, but as it turned out, I had to hire some men and take them with me to do this moving. So I went to this place where you have people sitting around waiting to be hired, and I got this is a really, the man who went with me to get this stuff is still here in Lincoln, and he can tell this story, and you'd never believe this. If you saw it in a movie, you would never believe it. But I was a black man and a Mexican and an American Indian, and they were driving an old Tennessee, I think it was a Kentucky license plate. So here's the story. I get them at work a while. One Afro-American, did I tell you the name of the poem? It's called The Blue Jars. I get them at work a while. One Afro-American, one Native American, and one Chicano. They follow me up the steep 2-mile hill in the Black Hills forest. They are driving a rusted-out old model car with a Kentucky license. It drags all the way up. The man of the house that used to be my house says, "I'll give you 2 hours." Is that any way to wind up 30 years, I say to myself. I head for the blue jars, the ones my mother gave me. "You're not taking those," he says. "You're not raping my house." The Mexican covers his ears and runs frantically out on the deck. The man of the house stoically stands in front of the cherrywood cabinets with the porcelain knobs. He always has to call the shots, I say. So I let them set. The truck just stands there, Hawkeye's watch as we load, my life's blood pouring into the U-Haul. I start down the hill with the other displaced persons, the Afro-American, the Native American, the Chicano following in their rusted-out old car. We have taken 4 hours. They grin all over with the $20 each I give them. I leave behind the mountaintop and the empty womb of a house. The blue jars still grace the counter filled with tea bags, sugar, rice, and other staples which make up the sanctity of marriage. This one is another assignment poem. How long have I read? Does anyone... Am I okay? This one is another one that was an assignment. Dr. Clefcorn said go someplace early in the morning. Jim did that too once, didn't you? I don't know. Anyway, I did it anyway. I went someplace early in the morning and wrote. And this one was, I went to Conroy's Bakery on South 48th. I'll tell you, they got great stuff. Anyway, I went at 6:30 a.m. and I was bringing things for class that day. So this is the poem I wrote as I sat there that morning. Some folks wonder where heaven is, and I am blessed to have found it at Conroy's Bakery on South 48th Street. I'll take a strawberry stick, the woman in blue sweats says to the woman in white. We only have blueberry and cherry. Okay, she answers, I'll take a blueberry, and one of those, as she points toward the delectable apple turnovers. Shirley Temple bounds in with her father and demands a cupcake with a bunny on it, and skips out with a cream-filled Bismarck for Dad, her treasure in a starchy, stiff, white wax sack. They come one by one and select with gleaming eyes, finally pointing to one perfect, specially for them, pastry. Tough choices, I say to myself, as I look around and smell the indescribableness of sugar, flour, and butter from the oven. The all-night baker puts on his coat and cap and heads out the back door, satisfied with himself as the shoemaker with the elves. Green, yellow, and blue cookies shaped like beautiful eggs face upward toward the glass, as the Belgian slices and the Finnish bars sit silently competing for purchaser's choice. The pastel butter spritz and the lemon princess squares make sweet sugary music by the snickerdoodles and the turtles and the chocolate wedges as the thumbprints overlap the haystacks. Still they file in, and the fried cinnamon and apple fritters disappear never to be seen again. The customer across the room digests the Lincoln Journal Star and the butterscotch Long John, and she has had them before, I can tell. 2 new employees arrive and appear behind the counter as the darkness of Prescott Avenue turns to dawn's glow. Outside, the USA Today man stuffs his paper machine with trees that have turned into news. The lineup continues, and it's on with the business of the day as the heartbeat of the city pulses on inside Conroy's College View Bakery. I'll read one more funny one, and then I'm going to go back to my book. This one's called Sex and Yard Work. One day I said to somebody, I said, what keeps them together? And she says, sex and yard work. And so I said, I've got to go write a poem. Sorry, I'm going to hang up. They said sex and yard work kept them together for 10 years, which caused me to speculate upon the biologically combined and the socially constructed habits of some humans. With either sex or yard work, you can get a workout you won't soon forget. Fertilization, of course, may not necessarily be the intent when human desire is huffing and puffing away, but it is a deliberate deed when preparing the lawn in the spring. One person describes sex as an obsession of the well-fed world, but personally I don't think yard work has come that far. It's like pitch, some say. Once you get into it, you're stuck, and I'm not sure that's typical of yard work either. It would appear the couple, the object of the above diatribe, didn't have enough going for them, that is to say, outside of sex and yard work, because he was at the dance Saturday night with someone else, but then he did all the yard work. I'm going to read this one, I guess, before I go back to my book, because it involves Pat, a friend of mine who's here. It's called Playing Chicken at UNL. I don't know if you know I wrote this, Pat. Meeting Pat for lunch really is ordinarily quite a pleasurable experience, except when we need to meet on campus at noon. Circling the parking lot 1 time, 2 times, 3, passing prim, patient parked woman who is also waiting as I drive round and round, cursing, outnumbering prayers. Suddenly I spot one as a car backs out right in front of me, and I swerve into it without a second thought as the prim, patient parked woman looks proverbial non-present daggers in my direction, and she misses her big chance. Oh, and where did that campus police officer come the heck from, pray tell? You didn't know this happened, did you? Oh, I roll down my window as he approaches me and proceeds to lecture on courteous driving, and wouldn't I feel better if I hadn't made such an obvious dash into a parking place someone else had so patiently been waiting for. For the first time ever, I wish for the gray hair that usually adorns people of my years, because that 20-year-old surely had reflexes as good as mine. No respect at all for the elderly. Well, Jim, I do have one here I wrote in your class. 60 is scintillating. We had an assignment to do a poem of alliteration. And we also had one to do with using a number. And since I was going to miss one of the two classes, I put both of those in one poem. So we have the alliteration and the use of the word 60 in this poem. I don't remember if I got a grade or not. Okay, 60 is scintillating in some situations, especially when you're sick of being sexy. 60 is satisfactory if you're structurally sound and you're not on a subcommittee or not a subcontractor or a sublimate of some sort. If you eat salads and sauerkraut, not salty, and throw in a little salsa and sesame, you should surmount a few more seasons. If you can script a good sestina when you're 60, you should be able to serialize at 70. Stabilize, sanitize, and sensitize yourself at 60 to avoid shakes, sniffles, sock rot. 60 should do the shuffle on Saturdays to Stardust. If you read Shakespeare surreptitiously, you will suffer sadness of the soul, so satisfy yourself with verse and song. If the Surgeon General says smoking stinks, stifles, and shrinks your skin, survey the circumstances before you suck in. If you're a stalwart stateswoman, run for the State House and make a serious place for yourself. Well, I'm off to superimpose some syncopation on some seniors at the sleep center who think I'm Stygian. Got you there, I bet. Bye now. But someone said, would you read the poem about your grandmother? And, you know, I just had no idea this was impacting people like this. I really didn't. And I looked out, and there were men in the audience. And it just shocked me to where I could almost not finish, but they were all crying themselves. I presume that they had had a homesteading background themselves, that their parents had had a homesteading background or their grandparents. Something rang a bell that really caused them to emotionally upheave, you know. And I've had so I've done this so recently that I have not, it's been overwhelming to me, some of this reaction. And I had somewhat that type of reaction to a couple of my poems, along with a lot of laughter, I might add, because a lot of my stuff is quite humorous in a sad sort of way. and so I did have this reaction in Sheridan, Wyoming a couple weeks ago, too. So it's interesting to see what's coming. It's all new to me, very new. I will read the one about my grandmother. Get back to the west here. Kate goes west. Once a struggling homestead, only the bleak hill stands. Their children played in the Sioux Past on horseback. Carrots struggled toward the sun. Purplish pasks smiled at the heavens. Will yearned to see the west, brought them on the mighty Chicago and Northwestern, leaving the lush Pennsylvania for the land of Spotted Tail, home of the Rosebud Sioux. Beautiful Kate came to the bleak hill, bringing 7 to nurture in June of 1912. There was Merle, Margaret, Roderick, Florence, Albert, Julia, and Carrie. Buffalo once trampled here and butted and fought to survive civilization. Will's cough nagged, the one he picked up in Cuba in the Spanish-American conflict. Kate's sob filled the lean-to as coyotes howled and shrieked, curious Indians stopped, and rattlers hissed. Don't leave me, Will, she cried, as 4 more hungry beaks were added to the nest, where the wind squeezed through the cracks, and Raymond, Russell, Helen, Orville joined the struggling clan. One August dog day, Margaret screamed from the cornfield. The rattler was quick, striking Margaret's milky, thin ankle, and they put her in a wagon while the venom raged. On Wednesday, she lay in the hotel, her dark braids down the front of her, covering her small breasts. She was laid to rest on the wild prairie among the rosebuds. She would have been my aunt. Will perishes at 50 as the bleak hill becomes the master. The precocious Albert bleeds to death while hunting rabbits, accidentally shot by Merle. my grandfather, my uncle, my aunt. Weary, grieving, herself consumptive, Catherine dies at 40, her body laid to rest on the rosebud, with son, daughter, husband. Helen, Raymond, Julia, Carrie, fragile as Kate, die a youthful, consumptive death. Orville, Russell, and Florence, my mother, survived to see the Berlin Wall come down, but I still miss Kate, the Kate I never knew, Kate, my grandmother. Sundance Centennial, I'll read that one. 18. I went to Sundance last year to visit my daughter, and I happened to be there when the Centennial was when they were having their 100th anniversary. It rained that day. It was a beautiful, it was supposed to have been a beautiful celebration, but you would never believe it. It was the 4th of July. I suppose the temperature was somewhere between 30 and 40, and it was a rain that just practically was freezing as it came down, and here were all these people all dressed up. Sundance Centennial. Welcome to Sundance, 1890-1990. The sign hangs high in the air, strung across the main drag like it has been for a year. But the gods must be angry, for the old town's birthday party is drenched by cold, driving rain as it hammers down on the residents who have survived the elements for over 100 years. Glossy yellow raincoats sit aboard horses whose hoofs clop in sloppy damp, while pickups shiver and squish through watery troughs. The sobbing, whining sheriff's car trails along after a saturated Sundance High School band, whose red shirts present a watery sag, and whose soggy socks plop up and down, squeezing water in and out. Red ink streams down white cardboard posters as the antique cars surge forward, their bug-eyed peepers crying real tears, while their gargling horns ooga down Main, and it rains on their parade. Weathered Sundance natives, undaunted by the elements, stand under awnings on corners, recalling a century of wind and storm, and generations who took many a journey to hell and back, but would not trade wonderful Wyoming for any other place on God's green earth. This one's about my dad. My dad was a gentle, sensitive man who came to this country when he was 14 years old, and ended up on a homestead when he was in his early 30s. Then he joined the Army as a United States citizen and went to France. It's called Big Mistake. The day of January 16th, 1991, I transact as usual, traveling to Bennett Martin Library, talking with friends on the phone. Roseanne Barr, I see by the National Enquirer, has just beaten up her husband. Bernard Shaw is in Baghdad covering the trauma, and they are trying on gas masks on the telly. The day of May 12, 1918, Albert Clive Morehouse is in France in the Battle of the Argonne Forest. He has his gas mask on and is plodding through the forest in a piercing cold, driving rain. He is ammo carrier number 7, and when the man ahead is blown to bits, he knows he must now carry the machine gun tripod. German snipers are everywhere and have shot 3/4 of his company. Someone made a big mistake when they sent us in there, he told me later. This kind, gentle man was my father. I ponder over the gentle people in their stocking caps at the library while they ponder over the last big mistake. I think about the poets I know, try to visualize them running terror-stricken down the street toward home in their gas masks. I finish my poem, get ready for a night's sleep, and crawl under the Indian quilt I bought for almost nothing from Lucille Kicking Bear. Lying there under the patchwork of the Sioux, I think of those we have massacred into oblivion in another last big mistake, and I hope for blessed sleep unto death. I have had things come out that I didn't even know were powerful when I'm writing. I didn't know that. And hopefully that'll continue to happen. I know they are because people are calling me up and writing me letters, which is very interesting. I printed 500 books, and I admit I gave a lot of them away. But This printing came out the 23rd of August, and I'm already ordered a second printing. So I know somebody's buying these books because they like my writing. And that's a very empowering feeling.